Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Wren. I'm 34 years old. My father pointed at me in probate court and told a judge I had left Grandma to die alone. And by the time my mother lowered her eyes and pretended to cry, I realized they hadn't just lied about me. They had rehearsed it. My dad, Vernon Wren, stood at the witness table in his Navy church suit, the one he only wore for weddings, funerals, and situations where he wanted people to think God was on his side. His lawyer had just asked him, in this soft, wounded voice, whether I had been present for my grandmother's final months. Dad turned slowly, like he was in a movie, and pointed one thick finger straight at me. "No," he said. Natalie walked away. She left my mother to die alone. The courtroom got so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights humming. My mom, Marlene, sat in the front row with a tissue folded into a perfect square in her lap. She shook her head for the judge, not at me exactly, but at the version of me they had brought into that room. A cold daughter, a greedy granddaughter, a woman who wanted the house but not the responsibility. My older brother, Eric, sat beside her with his arms crossed, wearing the expression he always wore when our parents were lying for him. Calm, slightly bored, protected. I didn't jump up. I didn't yell. I didn't say, "That's not true," even though every muscle in my body wanted to. I just looked down at my hands. There was still a faint scar across my left thumb from where I'd sliced it, opening a can of peaches for Grandma Evelyn, because she said hospital fruit tasted like wet cardboard. There was a tiny burn mark near my wrist from the night I reheated her soup at 2 a.m. and spilled it because her oxygen alarm went off. Those were my witnesses before any person entered that room. My body remembered what my family was denying. The case was supposed to be simple. Grandma Evelyn had died 3 months earlier, at 89, in the small yellow house on Briar Lane where she'd lived since 1968. Her will left the house to me. Not because I asked for it. Not because I manipulated her. Because, in her own words, Natalie was the one who stayed. My parents and Eric contested it immediately. They said Grandma had been confused. They said I had isolated her. They said I had kept family away so I could pressure a dying woman into changing her will. And then, when that wasn't ugly enough, they went further. They said I had abandoned her during her decline. That was the part that made strangers look at me differently. Money makes people suspicious. But neglect makes people recoil. My mother knew that. She was always good at choosing the wound that would bleed the most in public. For most of my life, I was the reliable daughter. Not the favorite. Never the favorite. Eric was the charming one, the big personality, the one who forgot birthdays and still got praised for calling 2 days later. I was the one who remembered medication schedules, picked up prescriptions, brought casseroles, handled taxes, sat in waiting rooms, and sent reminder texts no one answered. In my family, responsibility was invisible, unless I failed at it. Then it became evidence. When Grandma fell in her kitchen 2 years before she died, I was the one who drove across town at midnight because my parents didn't hear the phone. Eric had a work thing the next morning. My mom said her blood pressure was acting up. My dad said, "You're better with this stuff." That became the family arrangement. I was better with this stuff. Better with the pill organizer. Better with insurance calls. Better with bathing schedules. Better with changing sheets after accidents. Better with making Grandma laugh when she got scared because she couldn't remember if Grandpa had been dead for 1 year or 20. And yet, in court, my dad's lawyer stood there describing me like a vulture in a cardigan. "Your Honor," he said, "we intend to show that Ms. Wren's presence in Mrs. Delaney's life was inconsistent, self-serving, and financially motivated." Mrs. Delaney? Not Grandma. Not Evelyn. A woman reduced to a name on paper so my family could pretend love had never lived in that house. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Honorable Judith Mallory, glanced at me over her glasses. Not cruelly, just carefully. Like she knew families could be more dangerous than strangers when money was on the table. "Ms. Wren," she said, "you'll have your opportunity to respond." I nodded. My attorney, Paul Sutter, leaned toward me and whispered, Stay still. Let them overstate. That was easy advice from a man who hadn't been sitting at Grandma's bedside when she whispered, "Don't let them turn me into a prize." Because that was what they had done. They weren't grieving her. They were fighting over the shape her love took after she was gone. My father continued, voice breaking in all the right places. "My mother called me crying," he said. "She said Natalie hadn't come in days. She was hungry. Scared? Alone." My stomach tightened. That call had happened. But not the way he said. Grandma had called him crying because Eric had promised to visit with his kids and never showed. She had waited in her blue dress by the front window for 3 hours, asking me every 10 minutes if I thought they were stuck in traffic. They were not stuck in traffic. Eric had posted photos from a brewery. I still had the screenshot. But Dad didn't mention that. Mom dabbed her tissue under one dry eye. Eric looked at the wall clock. Then Dad said the sentence that changed the air in my chest. If my mother changed her will, it was because Natalie scared her into it. My mother would never have chosen one grandchild over her own son unless she was being controlled. That was the family truth, right there. Grandma choosing me wasn't love. My mother gave a small, tragic sigh. Behind me, someone shifted in the gallery. I heard a pen click. Then the courtroom door opened. Not loudly. Just enough. Everyone turned. A woman in green scrubs stepped inside, holding a thick black logbook against her chest. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her face had the exhausted calm of someone who had seen too many families become honest only after death. I knew her immediately. Angela Price. Grandma's night nurse. My father's face changed so fast I almost missed it. The grief vanished first. Then the confidence. Then the color. Angela walked to the front and looked at the judge. "Your Honor," she said, "I was Mrs. Delaney's private nurse during her final year. I was asked to bring the care log." The judge looked at my attorney. Paul stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Price was subpoenaed. We were waiting for her arrival." My mother's tissue stopped moving. Angela lifted the book slightly. "It starts on the first day I was hired," she said, "and if the court allows it, I'd like to read page 1. Judge Halpern looked over her glasses at Angela, then at my father's attorney. Mr. Kessler stood so fast his chair legs scraped the floor.
"Your Honor, we object."
"This is highly irregular. We have no idea what that book contains." Angela didn't flinch. She was 62, maybe 5'3", with gray hair pinned so neatly it made her look softer than she was. But I knew Angela. I had watched her lift my grandmother with the patience of a saint and speak to doctors like she owned the hospital. She held the logbook against her chest and said, "It contains dates, times, medication notes, meals, falls, visitors, missed visits, phone calls, and direct instructions given by family members." My mother's hand flew to the pearls at her neck. That was when I knew. She remembered. For 2 years, Angela had written everything down because Grandma Evelyn liked records. Grocery lists, church donations, birthday cards sent, blood pressure numbers. She believed if something mattered, it belonged on paper. When Angela first started, Grandma said, "My family forgets what I do for them. I don't want them forgetting what Natalie does for me." At the time, I laughed because I thought Grandma was being dramatic. She wasn't. Judge Halpern said, "I'll allow preliminary reading, subject to relevance." Page 1. Mr. Kessler opened his mouth again, but the judge raised one finger. Angela walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, and opened the black cover. The pages were thick with handwriting. Not neat. Not pretty. Real handwriting. Tired handwriting. Notes written at midnight, at 3:10 a.m., at 6:45 before coffee. She read, September 3rd. First night shift. Patient Evelyn Wren, alert and oriented. Granddaughter Natalie Wren, present upon arrival. Had prepared medication tray, labeled linens, emergency contacts, and meal chart. Patient states, quote, "Natalie is the only one who comes when I call." The courtroom went silent in that special way rooms go silent when everyone understands a lie has just been touched. Angela turned the page slightly but kept reading from the same entry. Son Vernon Wren called at 8:17 p.m. Patient asked if he would visit. He replied, quote, "We'll see after the weekend, Mom. Natalie is there, isn't she?" My father stared at the table. Not angry yet. Calculating? Angela continued. Patient appeared tearful after call. Natalie comforted patient, changed bedding, stayed until 11:42 p.m. My mother whispered, "That's not fair," under her breath. I almost turned around. Not fair. That was the phrase she used whenever truth entered a room without her permission. Angela read the next entry. September 10th. Natalie present at 6:05 a.m. Before work. Prepared breakfast, reviewed medication, paid pharmacy balance in cash after delivery driver stated account was overdue. No other family visitors. My brother Eric shifted behind me. I could feel his panic before I saw it. Because the pharmacy balance was supposed to be his job. That was one of the many family arrangements my parents had announced at Grandma's kitchen table, like they were making a royal decree. Dad would handle paperwork. Mom would bring meals. Eric would manage pharmacy pickups. I would just check in during the week because I lived closest. Within a month, Dad stopped answering insurance letters. Mom brought one casserole and called it emotionally draining, and Eric decided the pharmacy was too depressing. So I did all of it. Quietly. Like women in my family were trained to do. Mr. Kessler stood again. Your Honor, a care log is not proof of intent regarding the property. Judge Halpern said, it is relevant to the allegation your client introduced under oath that Ms. Wren abandoned the decedent. Sit down. He sat. My father's jaw tightened. I had seen that jaw my whole life. At report cards. At family dinners. At my college graduation when Grandma hugged me first. Angela blew it out in front of everyone. She kept going. More dates. More missed visits. More calls where Dad said he was busy. More texts where Mom asked me to stop making everything about caregiving. More entries where Eric promised to come by and never did. Then Angela paused at a page marked with a yellow sticky note. Her face changed. So did my father's. He recognized something before I did. Angela said, November 21st. Family meeting requested by Vernon Wren regarding Evelyn Wren's house. Mr. Kessler closed his eyes for half a second. I remembered that meeting. Grandma had been in her recliner, wrapped in the pale blue blanket I bought her after her last hospital stay. Dad stood by the mantel like he owned the room. Mom sat on the couch with her purse on her lap, ready to leave before she'd even arrived. Eric ate grapes from the bowl I had washed and set out for Grandma. Dad said, we need to be practical. Practical, in my family, always meant somebody else was about to lose something. Angela read, Vernon Wren stated to patient, quote, the house should stay in the immediate family line, not be tied up with Natalie's emotions. My face burned. Immediate family line. I was his daughter. But in his mind, the line ran through Eric. It always had. Eric was the son who lost jobs because bosses didn't understand him. Eric was the son who borrowed money and called it temporary. Eric was the son who forgot birthdays and was praised for showing up 2 days late with gas station flowers. I was the daughter who remembered medication times and got called controlling. Angela continued. Patient replied, quote, Natalie is the one keeping me alive in this house. Vernon responded, quote, don't let guilt make decisions for you. My father leaned toward his lawyer and whispered something sharp. Angela turned one more page. Patient became agitated after family left. Stated, quote, they want the house without the work. They want my death to be convenient. A small sound escaped me before I could stop it. Grandma had never said that to me. She had spared me those words. Angela looked at me then, and her eyes softened for only a second. Then she read the line that changed the air completely. Patient requested I witness a handwritten statement if needed. Patient said, quote, "If they ever say Natalie abandoned me, open this book to page 1. My mother started crying. Not quietly. Not grief crying. Performance crying. She covered her face with both hands and shook her shoulders like the judge was an audience, and she had finally found her cue. But Judge Halpern wasn't watching her. She was watching my father. And my father was watching the logbook like it had climbed out of Grandma's grave. Angela closed the book halfway and said, "Your Honor, there are 87 pages." The judge asked, "Do the entries continue through Mrs. Wren's final week?" Angela's hand tightened on the cover. "Yes," she said, "including the night she died." Every muscle in my body locked, because my father had just sworn, with one hand on the Bible and his voice full of fake heartbreak, that Grandma died alone because of me. And Angela Price was about to tell the court who was really there. She turned a page with the careful hands of someone who understood that paper could become a weapon. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing above us. Angela adjusted her glasses and read, December 3rd, 7:12 p.m. Natalie arrived with groceries, clean nightgowns, and Evelyn's prescription refill from Miller's Pharmacy. Evelyn ate half a bowl of chicken soup. Asked if Vernon had called. Natalie said, "Not yet, Grandma, but I'm here." My father stared straight ahead. Angela kept reading. December 10th, 6:05 p.m. Vernon called while Natalie was changing Evelyn's bedding. Evelyn asked him to visit Sunday. Vernon said he had a work dinner. Evelyn cried after the call. Natalie sat beside her for 40 minutes and held her hand until she slept. My mother shifted in the front row. That was the thing about truth. It didn't shout at first. It just sat there. Then it got heavier. Angela read another entry. Then another. Dates, times, medications, bathing notes, blood pressure numbers, meals eaten, meals refused. My grandmother asking for my dad. My grandmother asking for my mother. My grandmother asking why Eric never brought the kids anymore. And beside almost every painful line was my name. Natalie arrived. Natalie stayed. Natalie called the doctor. Natalie slept in recliner. Natalie cleaned. Natalie paid. I didn't look at my parents. I watched the judge's face instead. Judge Harlan Pierce had been polite but unreadable all morning. The kind of man who made you feel guilty just by being silent. But now his pen had stopped moving. Angela turned another page. January 14th, 9:30 p.m. Evelyn was very confused tonight. Repeatedly asked if Marlene was angry with her. Natalie called Marlene at 9:42 p.m. and put the phone on speaker so Evelyn could hear her voice. Call lasted 1 minute and 11 seconds. Marlene said, "I can't do this tonight," and hung up. My mother's head snapped up. "That's not fair," she whispered. Evelyn Wren asked me to keep it there after she signed it. My father's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, we have no authentication." Angela looked at him calmly. "It's not a legal document. It's a note." Judge Pierce said, "I'll allow her to identify it for context." Angela unfolded it. I knew Grandma's handwriting before Angela read a word. The letters leaned to the right, shaky near the end, but still stubborn. Still hers. Angela read, "If they ever say Natalie wasn't here, they are lying. She was here when I was ashamed. She was here when I smelled bad. She was here when I was scared at night. Do not let them make my girl look cruel so they can feel innocent." My hands went cold. I had known Grandma loved me. I had not known she had been preparing for them. Angela's voice softened on the next line. "Vernon wants the house sold. Marlene wants peace. Eric wants money. Natalie wants me to be safe. That is the difference." My father stood halfway up. That woman was confused. She didn't know what she was writing. For the first time all day, I looked directly at him. Not because I wanted to fight, because I wanted to see his face when the lie stopped working. Judge Pierce's voice cut through the room. Mr. Wren, sit down. My father sat. Angela placed the note beside the logbook, then reached into her bag again. This time she removed a small yellow envelope. Across the front, in Grandma's handwriting, were 3 words. For the judge. My mother made a sound like she'd been slapped, because she recognized the envelope too. It came from the stationery box Grandma kept in the top drawer of her nightstand, the one with pressed violets on the flap. The same box my mother had tried to throw away 2 days after the funeral, because, she said, old paper attracts dust. Angela said, Mrs. Wren gave me this the week before she passed. She told me not to mention it unless her family accused Natalie of abandoning her. The judge leaned forward. My father's lawyer looked suddenly less bored. Angela opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. She held it up. It was Grandma in her bed, thin and pale, but smiling. I was asleep in the recliner beside her, with a blanket twisted around my legs, my hand resting near hers on the bed rail. The television glowed blue in the corner. On the bedside table sat the purple pill organizer I filled every Sunday, a half-empty cup of vanilla pudding, and the little brass bell Grandma rang when she needed help. On the back of the photo, Grandma had written a date, February 2nd, 4 days before she died. Angela said, I took this at Evelyn's request. She wanted proof of who was there when everyone else went home. Nobody moved. Not my father. Not my mother. Not Eric. And for the first time since I had walked into that courtroom, I saw something flicker across my dad's face that looked almost like fear. Not grief. Not shame. Fear, because the story he had brought into that room was no longer his to control. The story he brought into that room was no longer his to control. For the first time that morning, my father didn't look angry. He looked exposed. His hand, the same hand he had pointed at me with less than an hour earlier, slowly lowered to the table. His lawyer leaned toward him and whispered something, but Dad didn't answer. He was staring at that photograph like it had been taken of a crime scene. And in a way, it had. Not a crime anyone could arrest him for. Something quieter. A family deciding that the daughter who stayed didn't count, because counting her would mean admitting everyone else had left. The judge took the photo from the clerk and studied it for a long moment. No one spoke. You could hear a phone buzzing somewhere in the back row, quickly silenced. My mother's tissue had stopped moving under her nose. Eric was looking down at his shoes, like the floor might open and save him. Then Judge Callahan said, Mrs. Price, was this photograph taken by you? Angela nodded. Yes, Your Honor. With Mrs. Wren's permission. Dad's lawyer stood too quickly. Your Honor, a photograph of Ms. Wren sleeping does not prove. It proves she was there, the judge said, without looking up. That simple sentence did something to me. It did not heal anything, but it made the air come back into my lungs. Angela turned another page in the logbook. The sound was soft, but everyone flinched like it was a slap. This entry is from February 4th, she said, 2 days before Mrs. Wren passed. My mother made a small noise. Not grief. Warning. Angela read anyway. February 4th, 7:15 p.m. Natalie arrived with chicken broth, lemon ice, clean nightgowns, and the blue cardigan Evelyn requested. Evelyn asked whether Vernon had called. Natalie said, not yet. Evelyn cried for approximately 4 minutes. Natalie held her hand and told her, You don't have to earn anybody's visit, Grandma. My throat closed. I remembered saying it. I remembered the lamp beside Grandma's bed flickering because the outlet was loose. I remembered the cardigan, pale blue, with pearl buttons, folded over my arm while I lied, and told her Dad was probably busy. Angela continued. 8:02 p.m. Vernon called. Evelyn was too weak to hold phone. Natalie put it on speaker. Vernon asked if Evelyn had signed the revised document yet. Evelyn became agitated. Natalie ended call after Vernon raised his voice. Dad shot up. That is not true. The judge looked at him. Dad sat back down. Angela didn't The kind of change a person has when they realize the ground under them was never floor. It was glass. Judge Callahan accepted the records. And what is the revised document referenced here? Angela swallowed. A deed transfer prepared by Mr. Wren. My father's jaw clenched. I hadn't known that part. I knew he had pressured Grandma. I knew he had sulked when she refused to discuss the house. I knew Mom had once stood in Grandma's kitchen, running her finger along the old tile counter and said, "It's too much house for Natalie to be sitting on someday." But a deed transfer? Prepared before Grandma was gone? My hands went cold in my lap. Angela said, "Mrs. Wren told me Vernon wanted her to sign the house to him immediately. He said Natalie was manipulating her." The room tilted, because that was the whole case, suddenly turned inside out. They hadn't accused me because they believed I abandoned Grandma. They accused me because Grandma hadn't. Dad's lawyer objected again, but weaker this time. The judge allowed Angela to continue with limits, and every limit still cut my family open. Angela read from February 5th. Natalie stayed overnight, changed bedding at 1:20 a.m., administered medication under hospice instruction at 2:05, sang Moon River when Evelyn became distressed. Evelyn repeated, "Don't let them make you feel guilty for being the one who loved me." My mother started crying then. Real tears, maybe. But I had seen her cry at furniture commercials. I had seen her cry when Eric lost a baseball game at 13. I had seen her cry when Dad forgot their anniversary and still somehow made everyone comfort him. Her tears had always been a net. If she cried, we all got caught. This time, nobody moved toward her. Not even Eric. Then Angela closed the logbook. For one unbearable second, I thought she was done, but she wasn't. She looked at the judge and said, "There is one final item Mrs. Wren asked me to keep sealed, unless Natalie was accused after her death." My heart slammed once, hard. Angela reached into her purse and took out a cream envelope. My name was written across the front in Grandma's shaky handwriting. Natalie Rose Wren. Not Natalie. Not the girl. Not your sister. My whole name. Dad whispered, "No." That whisper told the courtroom everything. Angela handed the envelope to the clerk, who handed it to the judge. Judge Callahan opened it carefully, like she understood she was touching the last thing an old woman had been strong enough to protect. Inside was one page. The judge read silently first. Her expression did not change much, but her eyes lifted toward my father once, then toward my mother, then toward me. "Ms. Wren," she said quietly, "this letter concerns you directly. I'm going to read the relevant portion aloud." I braced myself. The judge began. "If Vernon, Marlene, or Eric ever say Natalie neglected me, they are lying. Natalie was the one who came when I called. Natalie was the one who cleaned what I was ashamed of. Natalie was the one who sat in the dark when I was afraid to die." My face crumpled before I could stop it. I covered my mouth. The judge kept reading. "I leave the house in Natalie's care because she never treated it like property. She treated it like home. If my son is angry, let him be angry at me. I have been his mother long enough to know the difference between love and hunger." Dad's chair scraped backward. "Your Honor, I need a recess." Judge Callahan looked at him, calm as winter. "No, Mr. Wren. You needed honesty." The courtroom went silent. And then Eric, my baby brother, the golden boy, the one who had let me be called selfish while he sat there in a navy suit I knew Mom bought for him, finally spoke. "She told us," he said. My mother turned to him. "Eric." He didn't look at her. "She told us Grandma left the house to Natalie because Natalie was there. Dad said if we made it look like Natalie isolated her, the judge might question it." My ears rang. Dad lunged verbally before he moved physically. "Shut your mouth." Eric's eyes filled, but for once he didn't obey. "And Mom said Natalie would cave if everyone stared at her long enough." That was the sentence that hurt the most. Not because it surprised me, because it sounded exactly like her. Mom pressed the tissue to her lips and looked at me, not with regret, with accusation, like I had caused the truth by surviving it. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Not my father, not my mother, not even the lawyer who had spent the morning making me sound like a cold, greedy granddaughter who had watched an old woman fade away from a distance. Eric kept his eyes down. The judge leaned forward and said, "Mr. Wren, are you telling this court your family knowingly presented an incomplete version of events?" Eric swallowed so hard I could see his throat move. "Yes," he said, "I am." My father snapped, "Eric," not shouted, snapped. The same way he used to say my name when I reached for the last dinner roll before offering it to him. The same way he said it when Grandma asked why I was the only one taking her to appointments. The same way he said it when truth became inconvenient. Eric flinched, and that broke something in me. Not because I pitied him, because I recognized the reflex. Angela Price stood near the witness stand, with the logbook held against her chest. That thick black book looked almost ordinary. A nurse's notes. Dates? Times? Medications? Visitors. But in that courtroom, it was heavier than all of us. Judge Halpern looked at me. "Ms. Wren, do you wish to respond?" I had imagined that moment so many times. In the shower, in the car, while folding Grandma's sweaters after she died. I thought if I ever got the chance, I would have a speech ready sharp enough to cut through every lie they had told about me. But when the moment came, I only stood up slowly. "My grandmother did not die alone," I said. "She died with her hand in mine." My mother's face tightened. I kept going. "She asked me not to fight them while she was alive because she was tired. She said Vernon needed an enemy more than he needed a daughter." I didn't understand how true that was, until today. My father stared straight ahead. I turned toward him. "You pointed at me in front of strangers and said I left her to die. You knew I was there. You knew because Angela called you that morning. You knew because I sent the message. You knew because I put Grandma's blue blanket over her legs before the funeral home came, and Mom texted me asking where I had put her rings." Marlene looked down at her purse. That purse had been sitting in her lap all morning like a shield. I said, "You did not forget. You chose." The room went quiet in a way I had never heard before. Not peaceful. Exposed. Judge Halpern did not make a dramatic speech. Real consequences rarely sound like movie endings. They sound like paper sliding across wood, a pen clicking, a voice becoming formal. He ruled that the accusations against me were unsupported and contradicted by contemporaneous care records, witness testimony, and Grandma Evelyn's own written statements. He declined my father's petition to remove me as executor. He upheld the will. The house stayed exactly where Grandma had put it. With me, not because I had won something, because she had finally been heard. My father's lawyer gathered his files without looking at him. Eric sat with his hands clasped, staring at the floor like a boy who had finally realized the adults he followed had led him into a burning room. My mother stood first. She walked toward me slowly, and for one foolish second, the child inside me waited for her to say, "I'm sorry." Instead, she whispered, "You didn't have to embarrass us like that." And there it was. The family motto, spoken one last time. Not, "We hurt you," not, "We lied," just, "You let people see it." I looked at her and said, "No, Mom. You embarrassed yourselves. I just stopped cleaning it up." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in my life, I did not stay to fix her face. Angela met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. She held the logbook out to me with both hands. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this after," she said. I touched the cover but didn't take it right away. "You kept everything," Angela nodded. "Your grandma knew love leaves evidence. She said one day you might need proof you weren't crazy." That was when I cried. Not loudly. Not beautifully. Just a hard, quiet crack down the middle. Because for years, my family had treated my care like air. Necessary, invisible, expected. They breathed it in and then denied it existed. Grandma had seen it. She had written it down. In the months after court, my father called twice. The first voicemail was angry. The second was careful. I deleted both. My mother sent a birthday card with no apology inside, just a check for $50 and the words, "Hope you're doing well." I mailed the check back. Eric came by Grandma's house one Sunday with a box of her old recipe cards he had found in his garage. He stood on the porch and said, "I should have told the truth sooner." I said, "Yes, you should have." He cried. I didn't comfort him. That may sound cold if you've never been the designated family stretcher, pulled thin enough to cover everyone else's shame. But sometimes, healing begins the moment you stop making your pain convenient for the people who caused it. I kept Grandma's house for 1 year. I painted the kitchen the pale yellow she always wanted but never chose, because my father said it would look cheap. I planted lavender by the back steps. I kept her blue blanket folded over the armchair, where she used to watch rain slide down the window. Then I sold the house to a young couple expecting their first baby. On the last day, I stood in the empty living room with Angela's logbook in my hands. Page 1 was creased from being read in court. It said, "Natalie arrived at 6:42 p.m., carrying soup, clean nightgowns, and Evelyn's favorite peppermint tea. Evelyn smiled when she heard her key in the door." That line still undoes me. Not because it proves I was there. Because it proves she was waiting for me. My parents wanted a judge to believe I had abandoned Grandma. Instead, the record showed the truth. I was the one who came when the key turned. And after that day in court, I finally stopped knocking on doors where nobody was waiting for me. If this story hit you, tell me this. Have you ever been the person your family depended on, but still blamed when things went wrong? And do you think Natalie was right to cut them off after the truth came out? If you want more stories about family betrayal, quiet strength, and hard-earned justice, please like, subscribe, and stay with me for the next one.